All right, let's get started. Suhag Shukla has joined us live here on Twitter Spaces. It's also being streamed to our YouTube channel. This is Ravi Kapoor from Diya TV. For those of you that don't follow our coverage regularly, we've been following all of these different cast episodes really for the last few years. If you're interested in some of the backstory, some of the resolutions that have been sponsored, the laws that have been proposed, check out our YouTube channel at Diya TV USA and just type in cast, and you're going to find all kinds of stuff going back a few years. But Suhag obviously has been at the forefront of not just keeping track of what's going on nationally, but she's certainly been involved in the middle of these proceedings. So I'm really glad that she set aside some time to talk to me and the whole community that's interested in this topic. And the big news that was released is that the California court has dismissed with prejudice the longstanding Cisco CAS case, and it's a case that had wide-ranging implications. It was used in many forums as mechanisms to continue to propose CAS legislation and resolutions. So, Suhag, break this down for us. What are the implications? Give us, for folks who just aren't paying attention to the day to day on this, what took place here and what are the ramifications?
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, today really is a bittersweet victory for Sundar Iyer and Ramana Kompella, for the reputational harm that they had to undergo for 3 years, where the California Civil Rights Department chose the path of trial by media or witch hunt or whatever you want to call it, rather than putting together a strong case and filing it on strong factual grounds as well as legal grounds. I want to just clarify one thing that the case is still on. What's happened here is that the state had filed a suit against the Cisco systems, but also Sundar Iyer and Ramana Kampala. So what's been dismissed here is the claim against Sundar Iyer and Ramana. There is still mediation talks set for May 2nd. For Cisco. So this case isn't fully gone, but like I said, it's a bitter victory for two people who really were put through years of unnecessary and intrusive investigation. Well, I don't even know if it was intrusive because if you read through the facts of the case, it was almost an incomplete investigation by CRD. The staff attorneys, which seemed probably, at least from the filings, a little bit more interested in name and fame than actually seeking justice for people who have indeed faced discrimination in the workplace. So, just a little bit of the facts of this case. The case against Cisco. It made history. It was the first ever case, at least known to most people, of caste-based discrimination, an allegation of caste-based discrimination in tech. And the CRD, which when it filed the case was the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, and now it's the Civil Rights Department, filed the case under existing law, and but the way that they filed it, they almost seemed to try to legislate a new category of caste. If the facts had been there, and we'll talk about the facts in a little bit, but if the facts had been there to demonstrate that some sort of discrimination or harassment occurred, they could have easily filed it under national origin, where a number of intra-racial or intra-ethnic dynamics have been litigated in cases related to other ethnicities and other races. But instead, they decided to throw the kitchen sink at it. They tried to equate caste with religion. They tried to equate caste with color and race, as well as national origin, which includes both ethnicity and ancestry. So, back in when this case first came up, we saw that the state was doing something that the First Amendment prohibits it from doing. That the state cannot delve into or intrude into religious doctrine. But for some reason, the Civil Rights Department felt that it needed to equate the Hindu religion and Hindu practice with caste-based discrimination, and then made all sorts of false allegations about skin color being related to caste, religion, uh, mandating the Hindu religion specifically mandating discrimination, and a number of other xenophobic claims that they made simply to make their case, like Cisco was overrepresented by Indian Americans, and this kind of story that they painted of people of Indian origin running amok in this division, and that simply wasn't the case. So when we saw the way that they went about filing it, we were really concerned about religious freedom rights of Hindu Americans in California, because here's a state that's defining their religion for them. So we actually filed a motion to intervene when the case first went to court back in June of 2020. Uh, a few months or maybe a year later, we actually, because it was stuck in arbitration and other sorts of delays, and so we went ahead and filed a federal claim against the state directly, saying that the state had filed its claim in a way that violated the civil rights of Hindus in California. Um, what we see today is that this dismissal, you have to go back to December. And in December, there's a case management filing that indicates that the two defendants, Sundar Iyer and Ramana Kompella, were going to file what's called a motion for sanctions. And a motion for sanctions is basically a counterclaim where if the state has engaged in perhaps prosecutorial abuse, or there's not enough of a factual basis for a case, a defendant can kind of file a sanction for motions for relief. That filing indicated that the state was ready to dismiss its claim against the two defendants in exchange for them not filing the motion for sanctions. Now, later at some point, the motion for sanctions was filed, which I'm thankful for because it really um, opens, I think, the public's eyes to the types of facts that were suppressed, evidence that was suppressed by the CRD in order for it to pursue its claim. And last week, we noticed in the court portal that the two defendants withdrew their motion for sanctions. And then, of course, today we saw that the case was dismissed against the two defendants, not Cisco, but against the two defendants with prejudice. Meaning, there's a lot of questions about what does with prejudice mean. With prejudice means that the state cannot refile its case against the two defendants. So that's just kind of the legal background, and then we can delve into the facts as you ask me more questions.
Sure, absolutely. And obviously, we want this to be interactive. So, for folks that have interest in coming up on stage, just ping us and we'll bring you up. And it is an open dialogue. I'm not restricting anything. I know, unfortunately, we live in a world now where everything is echo chambers and you have the left talking to the left and the right talking to the right, and they're not talking to each other. And I know there are going to be many different opinions on this matter. So, if you want to chime in and have your voice heard, please do so. You can also clearly send us a tweet with your questions. Suhag, just tell me about the impact. I mean, I imagine you know the defendants in question. What did this do for these folks? What did this do for Cisco and Silicon Valley? Because this was not just the only episode. There was an effort also a couple of years ago in Santa Clara County, which we covered. And for those folks that want to go back and listen to that whole 7.5 hour hearing, something like that, where this was discussed, whether to have caste implemented in Santa Clara County, which is the hub of Silicon Valley and all these tech companies that are based here. Just provide some of that color as well, because this obviously is a pretty involved situation.
Yeah, sure. So this case essentially, even though it was still pending, even though the judge hadn't heard it, even though facts were readily available and the media was selectively um, covering just a story, almost presenting a story of, yeah, these two are guilty of discrimination, and so many of the policies that are now on the books across the country in college campuses, or even in the city of Seattle, cited this case as if it were evidence of widespread caste discrimination. And here we are today with the case at least against the two defendants, dismissed. And so the impact of it was significant because absent a trial, absent a decision, uh, people just took it, activists took it as evidence. Um, Also, what's key here is that a report by Equality Labs that's also been used by colleges and in the city of Seattle. You see some of the um, cite, it being cited. That too, that report earlier on in this case was denied judicial notice, which means that it was not accepted as evidence. Certain things like reports that are validated or that have kind of some sort of credibility or weight will just be given judicial notice. That might be, government reports and things like that. But this report, alongside a number of other kind of self-serving documents and declarations from activists behind these types of moves, were denied as evidence. Yet you see, like I said, so many of the policies that are now on the books that we're fighting against. That cite to this case as well as that report as the smoking gun for widespread caste discrimination.
All right, I'm going to get to actually a few questions. We have some folks chiming in. With prejudice just refers to not refiling against these defendants, but is Cisco, how long will Cisco be involved in this? Do you have any sense of where this is going?
Well, we know May 2nd is the date on the calendar for their mediation. Now, once a case goes into mediation, it's going to be hard um, to know, because the amount of information that's publicly available then begins to diminish. So May 2nd is the date, at least that we know now. For now, as to any next steps in terms of the case against Cisco. Um, so we're just kind of in a wait and see. Now, in terms of our Section 1983 claim, Section 1983 is a federal law that gives basically a cause of action to a private entity to sue the government for civil rights violations. So that's a case, or that's a claim that we have filed in federal court against the California Civil Rights Department. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens to our claim because we do not believe that the Civil Rights Department filed their case in a way that is lawful. Had they just stuck to the facts and used the existing category of national origin, it would have been fine. But they've tried to conflate it with of course, religion, as well as race and color, and have also kind of engaged in or the language of the claim also, I think, is dangerously close to denying equal protection and due process to people of Indian origin. So, what happens to that claim? We'll see. I hope that we can get some legal clarity on and some limitations placed on the government on how they go about filing future claims. But I will say that the fact that I saw echoes of our constitutional arguments in that motion for sanctions, the motion for sanctions that ultimately led to the Civil Rights Department dismissing its case against the two defendants, I feel some level of vindication that whatever arguments we filed on behalf of the community, they were able to file as individuals to be protected against some government overreach and abuse of power.
That's fascinating, actually. The fact that there was some pressure there because was it very clear that there was just no, there was nothing there? so to
Yeah.
speak, in terms of the evidence? I mean, is that, and why did this drag on so long? I mean, maybe just because of COVID. I know the court system in California has been backlogged, but talk about that piece.
Yeah, sure. Look, the court, the backlogs and the delays in California are kind of notorious from what I hear. But, let's talk about the facts a little bit. First is that Sundar Iyer was a classmate of John Doe, knew him for more than 20 years. Um, John Doe, of course, self identifies as Dalit. Sundar Iyer, even though the state knew this, but did not include it anywhere in its claim, is an agnostic. He wrote a blog on his Stanford um, personal blog about how he was irreligious and an agnostic, and that was made clear to the CRD. Yet they assigned him a religion because they wanted to equate caste discrimination with religion, and said that he was a Hindu Brahmin. Um, so Sundar Iyer, basically, he's a serial entrepreneur. He has a startup. It gets incubated at Cisco, and he gets millions of dollars of stock equity. And he says, "Okay, what am I going to need to do to build the best team?" And so he says, "You know what? I've had a couple of startups under my belt. Let me relinquish all of my stock equity. I'm just going to use it as a starting package to recruit the best team." So he recruits John Doe. So when John Doe gets recruited, he gets several $1 million in stock grants. And according to court records, he was also amongst the highest paid, one of the highest paid engineers at Cisco. Now, interestingly enough, the state draws this picture of this division that's all like Indian run and there's caste discrimination run amok, right? And the fact is, so this division has three head positions. One of the head positions is held by someone else who also self identifies as Dalit. And the other two positions at different points in time, before even I believe John Doe filed his claim, those two positions were actually offered to that individual who was Dalit. So there are Dalit senior leaders in this division. According to court records, Sundar Iyer even has family members who self identify as Dalit. So they still, though, in spite of a long relationship of 20 years going back, of Sundar Iyer recruiting him actively, um, they still wanted to, uh, pursue this claim of caste discrimination. With Ramana Kompella, what the court records show is that John Doe at some point was required to give some weekly reports. And so the claim was that Ramana Kompella, because he was influenced by Sundar Iyer's casteism, was treating him disparately and forcing him to do these weekly reports. Except that the idea and the direction to file these weekly reports actually came from Compella's supervisor, who is not of Indian origin. So Ramana was simply just the messenger. So, the facts here are quite questionable. At no point seems to be from the court filings did the state ask what caste these individuals were, or whether they identified by caste, whether they were religiously active or not. But they just went ahead and kind of assumed or made presumptions about it. And I think that the presumptions, the heavy handedness that the state pursued its investigation with, I think is kind of a warning uh, to what might happen if a bill like SB 403 passes, where it's a standalone facially discriminatory category, alongside facially neutral categories like race or ancestry or national origin or age. Everyone has an age, everyone has a race, everyone has an ancestry, but only South Asians are going to be presumed to have a caste. So that's why caste becomes facially discriminatory. So if you have a facially discriminatory category on the books, how then is a HR individual or admin, or eventually the state going to pursue these cases? What kind of presumptions are they going to carry into the investigation, as opposed to had they just gone in the way they always do for national origin cases or ancestry cases, they would have been less likely to make these leaps and presumptions based on false and negative stereotypes.
We have a whole bunch of folks I want to speak to, Suhag. Let me get to a couple more questions, and I'm going to bring some folks on stage to discuss this. And again, this is Ravi Kapoor from Diya TV with Suhag Shukla from HAF. We're discussing the Cisco CAS case that's been longstanding in Silicon Valley. The two defendants in this case are effectively off the hook now in light of what took place, and Suhag's breaking it down for us. She's been at the forefront of keeping track of this. Gosh, there's so much to talk about because obviously for a couple of years we've noticed different movements, different initiatives. Let me connect this to Seattle briefly, because I know folks are very interested in what happened in Seattle recently, as well as now the new proposed bill in California. So, explain the kind of nexus, because there does seem to be an effort to connect these dots. I've noticed it from the different resolutions that were passed. Universities, for example, Harvard being I think the latest one, though they have the Harvard Student Union put in a caste anti-discrimination policy in place. California State University system, which is the biggest in the country, did something similar. Obviously, Seattle put something on the books with Shama Sawant and getting majority support from her city council. Break all this down for us, because I think that's where the overarching comments that we receive inbound from the community, they're very concerned that that this whole thing is a plot against the community. I mean, do you feel that is the case, or do you think this is folks are overblowing the situation?
No, I don't. I think they're right to be concerned. You see the same falsified data being entered, whether it's in all the whereas clauses in a college resolution or in the city of Seattle. We're yet to see the type of data that Senator Wahab will submit in California, but some of the ways in which caste is defined, it's like the same language over and over again. And what I've noticed is that the language is getting more and more sophisticated because of the counter concerns that we're raising about the constitutionality of these issues. Some of the earlier resolutions were very, very transparent about the targeting specifically of people of Indian origin and specifically Hindus. Um, and that's back in like 2020. As you move into 2021, and the community is slowly but surely raising their voices against this, you start seeing a shift. It goes from Hindu to more subtler things, to then saying, oh, well, people of all religious backgrounds. So when you go from, say, um, let's see, CSU, where they specify certain Hindu terminology and misinterpret it as a means of trying to equate caste discrimination with Hinduism, you move fast forward to Seattle, which is 2023, and it says, oh, you find caste amongst all religions. You see a transition from the focus on people of Indian origin to now broader South Asian. And Seattle went the extra step of targeting more communities of color, and included Japanese, certain African communities such as Sudanese, Nigerian, and Somali. And now in California, you see the same thing. Japanese, once again. I mean, you would think that if anyone knows California history, you are not going to put on the books a law that targets Japanese people. I mean, we know the ugly history of our country and what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II. But here we are, 2023, with a law in the books that targets South Asians, but almost like a CYA, added Japanese, South Americans, as well as Africans. Notice who's missing. It's all all non-POCs, I guess, and others as well. And so I think absolutely most of these are interrelated. And what's really striking is how they ignore probably the only survey out there. And even that, I think more studies need to be done that are scientific, that are created in a manner that are generalizable. But if you look at the report by the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, where scholars from Carnegie, University of Pennsylvania, and Hopkins did a massive survey of Indian American social realities and attitudes, they found that while more than half or close to half of people surveyed there, all people of Indian origin, had faced some sort of discrimination, such as color, uh, religion, gender, national origin. Caste based discrimination was exceedingly rare. Now, just because something is exceedingly rare doesn't mean that you don't need to address it. And that's the point that we're raising. We raised in Seattle, we've raised with college campuses, and we've raised in California to say that how it's not a matter of whether we deal with caste discrimination, but how we deal with it. And the how is turning to well established legal principles and legal practice of facially neutral laws, laws that don't single out or target any one group, laws that fight discrimination without discriminating.
All right, our comments are blowing up here, and let me see if I can ask a few folks. And by the way, for folks joining in late, we will be there will be a recording of this session. We will upload it to our YouTube channel, Diya TV USA. And if you're interested in the entire story, all the backstory from Seattle to Chicago to Santa Clara County, we have all these different videos documenting this caste, this kind of growth of caste resolutions and laws that are being proposed on the books. Let's talk about Equality Labs for a moment, and then I'm gonna bring on some of the folks on stage. Equality Labs, for those of you that are unaware, they are a social justice group focused on the Dalit community. They have a very charismatic executive director, Tenmori Sundarajan. We've actually interviewed her on multiple occasions. You can go back and check some of our coverage about her. I find her to use the right vernacular when it comes to the progressive language that is needed. As a native Californian, I recognize the buzzwords that work in the Bay Area and beyond, and she uses every syllable to perfection. She's really honed her message quite well over the years. And it does resonate, right? She's able to get civil rights leaders. I've noticed, obviously, she's got a coalition of feminists, of LGBTQ community. She's brought on folks like Dr. Cornel West. And so these folks resonate in academic circles, and that's why a lot of the universities have gotten on board with her messaging. So tell me about them. Are they again, you're running your own organization there with a lot of very astute people. Is Tell us about like the genuine concern about caste discrimination, which is present in South Asia and has been
Mhm.
at least historically, versus living in the United States, which I think is a totally different dichotomy. As someone that was born and raised in the U.S. as a super micro minority, I think you and I were both raised in the Bay Area, born and
Mhm.
raised in the Bay Area. I mean, there were only a handful of Indian families or Pakistani families when we were growing up in the Bay Area. So there's obviously been this huge growth, no question, over the last 20 years. But talk about that dichotomy, because Tenmori has also been born and raised in the United States, and her life experience, I'm sure, is different than yours and mine. But has Equality Labs been doing this in a manner that you find to be systematic? Or are they going about it in a way that is following the rules? Because you're obviously, Suhag is an attorney. all the kind of stated laws on the books, or are they doing all this in bad faith?
I mean, I can't read their intentions, but what I can say is that they have scored the ultimate self goal. Because when we are brown people, we should be coming together to fight the type of discrimination that affects our community um, more often, but also working together to ensure that any intra-community tensions, whether they're linguistic, whether they're ancestral, whether they're religious, that all of those things our communities know that they're not allowed and that's protected against under laws. But instead, and it's not just me. I certainly wrote an article when the report first came out, but the Carnegie Endowment has raised questions about this survey, which members of the media are indiscriminately citing, and so it just becomes this like snowball effect of really questionable data, and now this snowball is shaping policies that are detrimental to not just so called upper caste Hindus, which is Equality Lab's target, but it's also going to affect all people, including Dalits and Bojans, who they claim to represent. And I want to make a point that Equality Labs claims to speak for all Dalits and Bojans, but the fact is they don't. We have many people in the community who have come to HAF, who have spoken out, who have organized, who do come from Dalit and Bojan communities, who are saying, we oppose SB 403, and Equality Labs does not speak for us. And so I think it's important for people to recognize that. I've even talked to people who then say, well, anyone who disagrees with Equality Labs doesn't know what they're talking about, or they're brainwashed, or whatever, like just some of the most patronizing things, basically robbing people of agency. These are the same people who are supposedly championing the rights of these communities, but then will put them down just as easily and just as quickly if they express an opinion that doesn't go with along lines with Equality Labs. If you go to the Carnegie Endowment, they do a pretty thorough unpacking of the report, and you can look in the report itself on how data was manipulated. Um, Things like people who didn't respond by caste, I think those responses were not counted. There was like an arbitrary nature of if people came from mixed ancestral backgrounds, then the authors decided to either put them to what they perceive to be the higher caste or lower caste. And I think from what I recall, there were only five options given for castes when if you go to the Indian schedules, there's thousands of castes. So what exactly they were measuring, we don't know. So I think we need to be careful of just thinking that just because someone is the loudest that they speak for everyone, and I think that goes across the board in our polarized environment these days, that it is the loudest that get the most attention. And I think there is a wave right now in the United States of social justice that wants to pit communities against one another rather than engage in kind of a pro-human approach that ensures that everyone knows their rights and responsibilities towards one another. And I think that they have benefited from that kind of divisive trend and riding the coattails of it.
All right, fair enough. Suhag, I'm going to I'm going to bring a guest on stage here. Karmveer, you're going to come up in just a moment. I'm just going to flip through the questions. By the way, for those of you just tuning in, it's Suhag Shukla from HAF discussing the long-standing Cisco matter on caste. The defendants have been are no longer on the hook for this matter, though Cisco continues to be challenged. So, in light of this, I mean, the odds of Cisco facing anything, do you think they're just going to settle, or are they going to have this whole thing dismissed in light of what happened with the two other defendants?
I don't have a crystal ball. I think that's a question for the Cisco attorneys.
Yeah. Okay. One more question on Equality Labs. I mean, in light of what obviously they've had a role in all these things. Have you sued them? Will you sue them? Is there grounds to sue? A lot of folks are obviously frustrated. They do have a lot of say in how these matters go, and they've clearly had tremendous amplification around the globe. Certainly, they have held court on social media, unlike any other kind of civil rights type group that I've
Hmm.
seen, certainly. So, what do you make of Equality Labs and where things are going with them legally?
Look, right now, my focus is on protecting the rights of Hindu Americans and Indian Americans and South Asian Americans in Washington, in California. We've also worked with the legal team that's representing the two faculty members against their case against Cal State University. So that's my focus right now because I believe that. And I think the courts still hold that the US Constitution is the law of the land. And the US Constitution guarantees equal protection and due process under the law. What that means is that you cannot be treated differently because of some protected class that you belong to. And in this case, South Asians are being singled out and targeted on the basis of their national origin and their ancestry. In some of the cases, on the basis of their religion. Um, it's not just un American, but it's unconstitutional. And so that's where my focus is going to be.
Okay, great. Karamveer is joining us here on stage. She's got a comment. Please chime in. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Great job, sir. Um, just a quick question to you. I don't know to what extent do you have California Workplace Religious Freedom Act or 2012 and Religious Restoration Freedom Act, RFRA. You said you filed something in the federal court, and I understand the RFRA applies only to federal government, and now the California has its own version of Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So does that apply in any manner with this issue that you're confronting?
Good
Mm.
question. I'm very familiar with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. RFRA is what it's called in certain circles. Um, there's enough of a what Section 1983 provided the mechanism for us to file on the basis of a violation of the First Amendment, both equal protection and free exercise. Um, religious, I'd have to look to the California law. We selected 1983 because there were also equal protection and due process issues that we wanted to raise. And so Section 1983 provides kind of a comprehensive legal apparatus to pursue.
Now, do you
Um,
think you could
right.
have a right that your religious rights of the Hindus might have been assailed by stifling or belittling Hindu tenets? I don't know if that will be a stress or not. But whose
Well,
freedom can you
yeah.
fight for? That's another question you'll have. I don't know. I mean, it's anyway. But these fellows who have withdrawn the lawsuit now, the government has done it, isn't it? The Californian government.
Yeah.
S-
Yeah, the California Civil Rights Department, the governing body that's tasked, or the implementation body of the
yeah.
non-discrimination laws in
So
California,
why did you
they
consent to their withdrawal?
I did not consent to their withdrawal. I don't represent the two
Okay.
defendants, right? So Cisco has their attorneys. The defendants had their own attorneys because there were two separate claims here: a claim against Cisco and a claim against the two individual defendants. Which is actually that's another point to raise, that that's not all that common to individually named defendants. Usually, most of these cases, unless it's egregious, from what my understanding is, and talking to other people who work in employment law, individual managers are generally not named. So not only were they named, but literally the day the case was filed, AP News had already covered the story, which means that the state had already, alongside its filing, a PR strategy, which is also unusual. So, in terms of why did the state settle, while uh, the motion to withdraw or to dismiss the case is kind of bare bones. If you look back to a December case management filing, it states that the defendants were getting ready to file this motion for sanctions, which is basically where they raised some of the issues of potential prosecutorial abuse, suppressing and fabricating of evidence, as well as their own constitutional rights, which included their religious freedom rights. Sundar Iyer to be an agnostic and not be assigned a religion. Ramana, of being presumed to be of a particular religion and having particular beliefs. So, I think the state, it seems to me, didn't want that motion for sanctions to be heard. So, whether it was the questionable or the shaky facts upon which this case rested on, or whether it was the constitutional arguments that the defendants raised, that we have raised on behalf of the community. I think probably every single one of those things contributed to where we are today. The other thing I'll just add is when we filed our federal claim, the CRD, another government body has to get involved to defend the CRD. And so when HAF sued the Civil Rights
Did
Department, I can only imagine what the attorney that is now, assigned to defend the California Civil Rights Department, what they were thinking as they're looking through how the case was filed, how the California Civil Rights Department was trying to define the Hindu religion, that that third entity is probably thinking, "What are you doing?"
just
So all of those
yeah,
things
just a
together
small
may have had an
question, last
impact.
question, just small.
Mhm.
What was your standing questioned in the federal court or in the state court? Who are you? That kind of a thing, the standing.
It has
Yeah.
not, our claim has been delayed, both the motion to intervene as well as our Section 1983 claim, because we were awaiting a decision on whether John Doe had to arbitrate before he had a right to be in court, because um, that's something that I guess all employees that sign a contract with Cisco are
No,
required
but
to go through
you
arbitration.
are representing us Hindus, so I was just wondering because these courts in the United States, they take a very narrow approach. Since you are not the injured party, and they're going to ask you, what is your stake here? And that's yeah,
Well,
yeah,
when a state body files a claim in a manner that violates the rights of people outside of that, or outside of that claim, that's the argument we're making in our motion to
good.
intervene,
Thank you.
right? So that hasn't been ruled on yet.
I'm done. Thanks.
Great. Thank
Hmm.
you, Karamveer. I'm going to get to Puneet in just a moment, and then Satish, and then Harjeet. Just give me a moment. I do want to answer have some of the questions coming in from the crowd answered. I see something here from Nitin, who says that Cisco recognized the existence of caste discrimination in their workplace, so they've added that as a prohibited category of discrimination. So thanks for that note, Nitin. By the way, I did see that you used Diya TV footage on your Twitter account, which I don't mind, but at least give us an acknowledgement as a one as a professional courtesy. So you're welcome to get clout if you want, but feel free to acknowledge our work, as our team works really hard to cover the community. I don't know, do you have any thoughts on Cisco adding caste as a protected category, Suhag?
Um, I saw one tweet about that, and I've not been able to verify it. So My arguments for Cisco or any corporation or any college or city or state adding this category is that it's a facially discriminatory category that is going to lead to discriminatory implementation and therefore a denial of equal protection due process if you're an employer, Title VII, if you're a college, Title VI. So I would really advise against it. Otherwise, you're likely going to find yourself in court.
One more quick question, then we'll go to another audience member. Another tweet comes in saying, will this win translate in other countries like Canada, where there's a case before a human rights tribunal? Do you know much about the Canadian case?
I do. I've been following it closely. The Toronto School Board, or Toronto School District Board, I can't remember which way the words are, but anyways, they floated a motion to add caste to their non-discrimination policies. And basically, the vote there was not to add caste, but to kind of punt it up to the Human Rights Commission there. And because I think under my understanding is I'm not an expert in Canadian law. My understanding is that the school district could not create a new category, but that the either the Human Rights Commission could at least provide a guidance on whether caste is already covered under categories like national origin, ethnicity, or ancestry.
Pradeep, go ahead. Please chime in.
Thank you, Diya TV, and thank you, Suhag. Great work. And I would just like to point out, so when this was going on, even in Seattle, it was just a collusion of all Indophobic and Hinduphobics. So like Khalistanis were actually jumping up and down, and it's just like, for example, this guy who is a partner of Harmeet Dhillon, he used the word Mahachuda. So Chuda is basically people who do the sweeping work in Punjab, and you can see like this is like calling somebody an N-word and worse. And his all profile is about jar 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 jar, and he was like at the forefront of, yes, we should do it. And it's so funny, like Khalistanis are supporting it. That's something that probably you don't know, but maybe I can help you is, when the Indian Constitution was being made, the Sikhs, they basically fought to have casteism recognized inside their religion, so that like they get the quota benefits. Otherwise they were like, all these people would go and leave to Hindus. And all these Khalistanis are now using this to like paint as like castes or something like that. And like the third point I would like to make is, even when we had like this 2020 elections, the California, when they were trying to bring quotas or something like that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the people voted against it, this kind of like quota policies or something like that. And California, I think, has the highest number of immigrants, and it is as woke to the side of woke or liberal as it gets. So it's again, even in this woke echo chamber, like as Suhag said, most people are against it, but this loudest people just like capture the narrative and they just paint a different picture. But when it actually comes to voting, uh it's very, very different. And so, and that thing, and I will just, so yeah, these are the 2 points I would make. uh One is, yeah, she's absolutely right, they're just like a very loud. So even if it is no surprise to me that even a Dalit voice was against this, because like the best system is this meritocratic, same game and everybody plays by the same rules. And the other is basically all this cabal of people who hate Hindus are using this to beat as a stick when they are themselves the biggest castes. So yeah, thank you.
Um, Thanks, Puneet, for sharing that. Uh, I don't really have much to add except that in terms of some of the arguments that you need a category, a specific category of caste in order for these cases to be litigated. Just in Canada, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, um, uh, a Sikh gentleman who identifies as Dalit won a case or a claim against, I think, one or two other Sikh gentlemen. They had uttered some slurs, maybe denied him a ride. I can't remember the exact facts of the case, but they filed under ancestry. I think there's a recent case I think I read last week out of the UK. Similarly, they won under ancestry. Obviously, the Civil Rights Department filed its claim. They, kind of went too broad in trying to essentially create a new category by saying it intersects with all of these when the rightful area should have been file a national origin claim with the right facts that would support your claim. And so, this idea that you need to have these specific categories really doesn't play out on the ground as to where people are seeking remedy. And just from a policymaking perspective, look, the United States is growing more and more diverse. Are we going to keep adding categories? And so, what does that mean? We have a list of 20 categories that are protected for against discrimination. Does that mean that those that we overlooked are not protected? Versus you have these simple categories like race, ancestry, age, uh, sexual orientation, whatever it might be, but they will protect everyone evenly and they put the same obligations on everyone.
Can I just
Go ahead.
so Suhag, again, this case against UK and Canada. So actually, I also managed to look at it. So I didn't read like the entire what went into the tribunal, but like the facts of the case. And it was not just somebody used a slur. It was a very violent that we are going to do this to your daughters and mothers, and then using this casteist slur. And again, all of them, like all these three people, like one in UK and two in basically Canada, have been Jatsiks, for example. And like this Harmeet Dhillon thing is like first line is proud Jatsik, who is basically saying this JP Deol is like we should do this, and he's a partner of Harmeet Dhillon. He's like all over we should do this nonsense and whatnot. And again once more, and what you said is very valid. Even if you look at, for example, if correct, I might be off on a little bit. I think in Washington, so the Cambodians control 90% of like the donut shops. So I think Cambodians are very privileged, and like who are like controlling a lot. So it's just like America is such an amazing melting pot. And I just think it's unraveling the country if we go down this route that India did, and like putting thing in brackets. So I think as we Indians, we appreciated more than everybody else. Okay, this was like an open meritocratic system, and you can be from anything, and everybody succeeded here, whether it was Brahmins or Jats, and after a couple of generations, everybody was doing it. And just to put us into brackets again, I think it would be very tragic and the unraveling of America.
Okay, thanks, Puneet, for chiming in here. I'm going to go to Satish here in just one moment. I just want to see if I can get one more question. There's been just a slew of tweets that have come in. Let's see here. Let me go to. Well, I'll get to those questions in a moment. Let's go to Satish, who I believe is in the UK. Satish, please chime in. Go right ahead, Satish G. Satish, go ahead. You can go ahead if hopefully you can unmute yourself.
Jai Shri Ram, good evening or good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you all are. Thanks, Diya, and thanks, Ravi, for the opportunity to have a quick word. Suhag, congratulations, although we've exchanged a long-distance transatlantic embrace already on the results, but just to say it in person again, wonderful result. I've got 2 points I just would like to have a little bit of clarification on. As you know, we faced this issue in 2016 here in the United Kingdom, where the same stable of activists appealed to parliamentarians. What they did is they created a straw man about the Hindu, about the caste system, about these terrible Brahmins at the top of this caste system, etc., etc. And it was presented so effectively that the parliamentarians pretty much rushed it through Parliament, like you've mentioned, without due regard to process. There was no impact analysis, there was no community consultation. In fact, the only piece of legislation which we had found passed so quickly was legislation typically passed during wartime. This is how quickly they pushed it through Parliament. And as a consequence of that, we were able to question process. We were able to question the principles which had been presented to them. And ultimately, it resulted in, although the legislation was passed by upper and lower houses, it's never been enacted because of the underlying flaws in it. It never got to the stage where there was a case established on or even brought under these terms. So we never got the chance to perhaps present to a court that there was a vexatious or a malicious attitude underlying this litigation. In this case, the Cisco case, I think if it was in the United Kingdom, there would be clearly grounds to assert that this was a vexatious and malicious litigation where the process itself was a punishment, and the eventual outcome of the process would have been a devastating punishment for the people concerned. And in the United Kingdom, there are quite punitive remedies. So my first question would be, are there grounds, now that this has gone through, for punitive remedies to be sought? It's probably important if there are, because it would establish the precedent and it would get rid of an awful lot of frivolous, malicious litigation. So that's my first question. Is that an avenue that's open? And my second question is that since the peripheral intention was to establish caste as a hate trope in the consciousness of as many people as possible, and my concern is about the non-Hindu community, the broader non-Hindu community, the American citizenry, since the part of the intention was to establish in their minds, is a remedy available to any Hindu American to be able to now ask for some sort of public interest type litigation or some response whereby they can assert that as a community harm has been done to us, and so we need a remedy for that as well. So those are my two questions. Thank you, Suhagji.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Satishji. So on the first question, in terms of is there an avenue um, for punitive damages, that would be something that the defendants would have to pursue, and in some sense, the motion for sanctions um, was kind of a flavor of that. Certainly, they could file their own Section 1983 civil rights claim and seek damages. Whether they're going to do that or not, I don't know. I'm not their attorney. But there are avenues like that when there's kind of this abuse of power and civil rights have been violated. As far as a community, um, I mean that's a hard one. As far as from the perspective of rights, um, that's what the HAF Section 1983 claim against the state, for the way in which it went about filing its claim and, um, you know, getting into areas of religious doctrine, which the First Amendment prohibits, treating Hindus and Hinduism in a manner disparately from any other religion or ethnic group. All of those claims are made in that Section 1983. In the hopes that the state's going to be far more careful in ensuring that they are not trampling on rights, but actually doing their job, which is protecting rights. Um, in terms of I mean, essentially what I'm hearing is kind of, is there a claim for, say, wide scale defamation, or maybe something even a little bit more than that? I think that would be a little bit difficult, and I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff right now, not something that I've looked into. But you have the state file a case, but then after that, there's like an arm's length. Yeah, they may have put out the initial press release, but first of all, there's a certain level of immunity that a state body has, to protect it so it can do its job, and once in a while gets it wrong, or maybe more than once in a while gets it wrong. But then, you have kind of the media apparatus, running away with this. And at that point, who actually is causing the harm? I think those are all interesting questions, and I would have to explore more in terms of whether there's an actual, claim in which punitive damages, um, would be appropriate, and whether there would be a cause of action for that. But certainly on the claim of civil rights being protected, that has been done, and we'll see what happens. Um, with the Cisco case, is the court going to say, well, now, if the end result of the mediation is that the state withdraws its case against Cisco, um, then at that point, the court may say, well, now HAF, your claim for civil rights violations is no longer ripe because the case has been dismissed. Um, so maybe we'll have to test those arguments in another court, and there's plenty of opportunity, unfortunately, whether it's Seattle or, the nearly dozen universities, CSU, of course, but the dozen of other universities that have passed similar policies, because many of these universities are, state schools, so then they are considered the government. Many of these schools are, federally funded, either through, grants, or direct grants, or through scholarships. So they too are, required to, uphold certain federal laws. So, we'll just have to see. I do take heart in the fact that these arguments, were able to help these, two individuals after a 3-year, witch hunt. So I'll leave it at that for that question.
Can I just ask a follow-up, Ravi?
Please, of course.
So if I can take what you've just said, Suhagji, and put an offensive parallel to you, and I apologize in advance. The Jewish community had a trope about the Shylock character. Shakespeare painted them and branded them as being particularly mean and frugal when it came to money, and that trope has followed them for a long period of time. Let's assume somebody went to the authorities in California and said, oh, there's this terrible community. They discriminate against the others. Their dealings of finance are different when they're dealing with their own community. And so I'm being discriminated against. And that trope was then presented and accepted by the authority without due care. I imagine a member of that Jewish community, any member of that Jewish community, would be entitled to say that we have all been harmed. And that's the situation that I see with regard to this trope being enshrined either into process law or into the common consciousness. So that's I think we have a very, very good case to be tested in the front of the appropriate authority as and when the time comes. But the last point that I just wanted to make is here in the UK, we have Nolan Principles of Public Life, and it's a schedule of standards of what's expected from an individual, any individual in public service. And they're quite extensive, they're fairly thorough, and if an individual doesn't adhere to them, there are significant penalties as a result. And my question is, those who have already accepted this in Seattle, they are public servants. Do you have the equivalent of these Nolan principles, which could be applied to them as standards, and perhaps their performance or lack of adequate performance and due diligence could be measured against such principles? Do such principles exist?
I'm not, I don't believe so, but here, look, if a public official, is not doing their job, they get voted out. That's how you make your, voice heard. It's a long game, I understand, but when elected officials are harming, any American, we need to vote them out, and that's the power that folks in California have. especially those living in Fremont, California. And it's interesting. I'd love to see what the UK has to see if there is an American parallel. But to your previous point, in terms of the denial of equal protection, yes. I mean, those are some of the arguments that we've raised, that the state has perpetuated false and negative stereotypes about Hindus and people of Indian origin and have treated us in a manner that's different from any other ethnic or religious group. So in that sense, yes, the protection, to stop the state from treating people unequally, to using these types of tropes as the means of doing that, that is being challenged in our civil rights claim.
Brilliant. So thank you so much. And Raviji, again, thank you very much for that. Just for the audience, please do remember, this is a global battle. It's not just a matter of coincidence that first this issue raised its head here in the United Kingdom, then it raised its head in the United States, and there is a conversation now starting in Australia. This is a global issue, it's a global battle, and ultimately its target is always going to come back on the Hindu community, especially in India. So please do stay engaged with this issue and give as much support as you can. In fact, more support than traditionally we have given to those members of our community who have decided to stick their heads above the parapet and who are pursuing this on our behalf. We really do owe them as much support as we can. Suhagji, thank you very much. And Raviji, Jai Shri Ram, good night to everyone.
Thanks.
All right, thanks for being with us, Satish Ji. By the way, we are going to take a few more questions from the audience. Feel free to chime in. Suhag, thank you so much for sticking around for the last hour. Just to recap, for those of you joining us now, Suhag Shukla from the Hindu American Foundation is just recapping the recent decision by a California court to dismiss at least the charges against two Cisco employees that were Indian American pertaining to caste. Now, Cisco is still on the hook, but obviously this will certainly, I would imagine, impact whether Cisco also either is if the case is dismissed against them or if they settle to some conclusion. Suhag, folks are joining us a little bit late, so they want to find out if you can explain to them why this particular case against the two defendants was dismissed with prejudice. If you just quickly recap that for our audience.
Yeah, sure. So to clarify, Cisco, the case against Cisco itself has not been dismissed, and there is mediation scheduled for May 2nd. The case against the two individually named defendants, Sundar Iyer and Ramana Kumpella, has been dismissed with prejudice. What with prejudice means is that the state cannot file another case against the two defendants arising out of the same incidents or series of incidents. If you look back to a December court case management filing, it appears that the defendants were preparing to file what's called a motion for sanctions, alleging prosecutorial abuse and falsifying and suppressing key evidence in filing their claim against Cisco and the two defendants. That case management indicated that if the defendants were willing to drop that motion for sanctions, the state would dismiss its case against them. And the motion for sanctions was actually ultimately filed, I want to say sometime in February. But then last week we saw that it was withdrawn. And of course, today we saw that the case was dismissed against them. So that's the procedural history on this case.
Okay, thanks for the recap, Suhag. Again, this is Ravi Kapoor from Diya TV with Suhag Shukla from HAF. We're just having an open dialogue and discourse about this decision that came down, and obviously there's been a number of these resolutions and now obviously legislation in the state of California, which we briefly talked about, and I'm sure we will continue to cover that particular issue in the weeks to come. Harjeet Singh, thanks for waiting. Appreciate it. Please feel free to chime in. Go right ahead.
Yeah, is my voice audible now?
It is.
Okay, yeah. So I just have one question. I think I really agree with Puneet, who came in and he talked about how caste discrimination is also kind of has come with us to Western societies as well. He kind of gave some examples of that he witnessed. I want to share one example of mine, and I definitely want Suhag's opinion. Once this kind of incident happened, what kind of a recourse is available to people like me who actually experience it firsthand? So this is a very kind of a gregarious case. I was really surprised, because I came to US 13 years back. I thought that, caste discrimination is most probably kind of a domain of our society back here, and I won't see it here. But it kind of frequently keep coming up. And this is one particular case, and I named that organization, and it's a particular company, a South Korean company. It's headquartered in Bellevue, Seattle, close to Seattle. And I joined that. The CEO of that company actually pulled me from Amazon because he was a senior, VP in Amazon. He kind of pulled me into his company, and once I joined, I noticed a very peculiar thing after a couple of days that almost all are kind of software engineers, and it was not actually. It's not odd to see in IT companies more people from India and China. I would say 75% of the people working there were from subcontinent. Not very odd. It is the way the market is. But what was very odd to me when I joined that company was I noticed that almost every single engineer, product manager, senior leader was Tamil Brahmin. And that kind of started kind of an odd kind of thing. I said, okay, I started checking actually after a few times, what is actually the caste mix up here? Generally, you go into IT companies, you see Telugu people, you see like people from Kerala, all states, even from North and UP as well. But here was this very unique company, a top name, and I'll name the company if somebody wants to know. That from CEO right down there, everybody was a Tamil Brahmin. And then there were like, I think in that 75% mix, there were 15-20%, I would say, Sikh Punjabis, not any other community, not from UP, not from Maharashtra, all Punjabis. So once I became very comfortable with the people around me, right? So most of them were Tamil Brahmin. They were my co-workers, and I got very close because I also have a lot of interest in, Vedic history and Vedic literature. So one of them became very close. So they started opening up to me. So I started asking them question, man, what is going on? Seeing everybody the Tamil Brahmin, why don't we have a Telugu, and other groups represented? And then they opened up, Harjeet, we do, prefer Tamil Brahmin. Once they were very open to me, they openly kind of admitted that. And then my question was like, why did you actually then hire Punjabis? Like, I'm a Sikh, why are you going? I have no kind of racial affinity. But in their mind, there was some kind of a racial, affinity with, white, good-looking gentlemen from Punjab. So they were kind of saying, we are all the same. We also came from there. We are also Aryans and all that kind of stuff. So this was like some very blatant, I was really stumped working there 6 months. I couldn't endure working in that organization for more than 6 months. Where openly, like right in the most advanced city of United States, I could see that hiring decisions, everything was being made based upon the cost. And I'm willing to give the name of that company, but how do you, if they go and survey that company today, they will figure out whatever I'm saying. Somebody should go and test it. So, Suhag, my question is, how do, in such cases where I am seeing this happening, how can I get it reported and get this investigated? Somebody needs to test my allegations, right? Need to come in and do a survey and really need to understand what's going on there. What is the recourse available under current constitutional makeup, and how do we kind of frame laws to kind of stop this from happening in future?
Well, what I would say, I'm not, I don't know that company, and whatever your experience
It's
was, I'd
Samsung
say,
Electronics America. I can name the company.
yeah, yeah, I don't need to know the name, but what I would say is that existing laws already protect against that. If someone is being denied opportunity within a department, or someone has been fired, or someone is being reprimanded on the basis of anything other than their, work quality and their inherent worth, you should file a complaint with HR, because it Indian people are not the only ones who have intra-community dynamics. You're going to have different dynamics in every ethnic and racial group. And so that's where these broad, facially neutral, generally applicable categories can provide remedy. If the companies have a responsibility to make that process easy, accessible, and to train all employees on their rights as well as their responsibilities under company policies and under federal law and under whatever state law. So, if there's linguistic discrimination going on, if there is color based discrimination going on, our existing laws already protect against it. And, you should reach out to your HR department. Has some opportunity been denied to you on the basis of your background? Have you been, are slurs or things like that consistently being uttered, so that there's a pattern in which the environment has become hostile? All of these things are not supposed to happen in the workplace, and you should contact HR and file a complaint.
Just a quick explanation. So I think I was not clear. Maybe I putting on my question. The issue was not, discrimination in promotions or firings. The issue here was clear-cut caste discrimination in hiring itself. Like the CEO was a Tamil Brahmin, everybody underneath him was a Tamil Brahmin, and they were clearly even not other Tamilians of other castes were also not getting hired. So the issue was directly, in hiring itself. Now, in this scenario, where should one go?
Uh, that I wouldn't know. I mean, the same sort of thing. If you think that there's a preference or that qualified candidates are being turned away because of their background, then should still go to the HR. It's no different because non-discrimination covers hiring, firing, as well as your current work situation. So, if there's a pattern that you're seeing, or of equally highly qualified people, and that sort of preference is being made on the basis of some sort of background, then yeah, you need to at least raise concerns and file a complaint.
Thanks for chiming in, Harjeet. I'm going to try to get through. I'm very sorry it's taken so long to get through all the folks who want to pose questions. We've had a deluge of tweets and interest in this topic. And by the way, Harjeet, just to chime in briefly, as someone that used to work for corporate media, that was often the only effectively brown person of my kind in the building.
Yep.
Trust me, there was no effort to try to give me a promotion, give me any kind of leeway whatsoever. And ultimately, I had to start my own company. That's what ended up happening, which worked out for me, which is fine. But the reality is, there's a lot of talent in this country, a lot of people of color, and let's not just relegate it to a Indian American or South Asian dialogue. There are a lot of people of color that are passed up for opportunities. And so discrimination is very real in this country still. And we can go across the board. I have friends of all faiths and backgrounds, and they face it, and it's different when you're an immigrant versus someone that's born and raised here. Those are different dichotomies. I mean, I see people that discriminate against immigrants when they are born, like in the own community. Like, I've seen all kinds of things, and it's unfortunate. And I think we need to have more open dialogue, which is why I think it was very important to have this conversation with Suhag and talk about these dichotomies. Let me try to pull up a couple more speakers here, Suhag. I really appreciate all the.
Raviji, Raviji, sorry, Raviji, while you do that, can I just make an observation?
Go right ahead.
So we have seen a pattern develop over the last few years where sweeping generalizations are made and presented without specific evidence. And what I've just been listening to is the whole of the Tambram community being tarnished by a trope. It's clear that if there's an individual who has suffered some sort of discrimination, there are remedies available to them. But equally, I think it's quite inappropriate to, and I'm not a Tambram or anything like that, but I just noticed the same process of identifying a community on a public platform and then in some way, shape or form diminishing them. And I don't think that's the right way to go. If there is evidence, then it's clear that that evidence should be presented. But equally, we need to be a little bit better than to make such sweeping broad brush statements. That's not appropriate.
Actually, Satishji, I'm glad you raised that, because I think when I talk about these policies being a self goal, people sometimes don't understand what I mean by that. What I mean by that is if you look to some of the footage from when the day the Seattle vote occurred, there were people demonizing so-called upper castes. Well, now in the city of Seattle, saying all sorts of slurs, making these generalizations. Now that caste is on the books in California, in Seattle, and even if it weren't, if any one of those people were employers or employees and engaged in that sort of rhetoric in the workplace, creating a hostile environment from people for other people from those communities, that is actionable. That is discrimination. The United States does not have a system like India where you have legislated a class of presumed victims and a class of presumed oppressors. The United States, even though caste in and of itself is a facially discriminatory category, in the way that it will be implemented, some of the hateful rhetoric that I do see from activists championing this, if they are in your workplace engaging in that sort of rhetoric, making you feel unsafe, and you come from one of those backgrounds, or even if you don't, you can file a complaint. So you're absolutely right that these blanket statements that are made about any community are inappropriate. And in the United States, there is no, at least under Seattle and some of these campus policies, there is no presumed victim or presumed oppressor. Now, California is trying to divert from that, but that's highly questionable under the law.
Yeah, Ravi, can I just quickly
Yeah,
clarify
please go
because
ahead.
it was directed at me. Yeah.
Go ahead, Harjeet.
Yeah. So, no, I agree with Mr. Satish that no such blanket, demonization of a community should be done, especially if you don't have evidence. But what I said here, I have complete evidence. I think truth be my defense. I am happy if somebody puts up a case against me of defamation, I'll defend it, with the truth be my kind of defense, because I have been there, I saw it with my own eyes, and the truth is out there for somebody to investigate. Secondly, Mr. If Mr. Satish was serious about this, about not defaming any other community blanketly, he should have objected when Puneet Sani came here and he started using slurs like Jat Sikh and all that. And he tarnished the entire community without actually having seen it firsthand. So I think, we should have same standards for everyone rather than pick and choose, because then we are being hypocritical.
I think everyone made a fair point. Harjeet,
Yeah,
let's leave
agreed.
that topic there. Look, I think this is why it's so important to have open dialogue. And honestly, this is part of the reason our television network does not just have some singular ideology to the left or to the right or pro one group or another. We have to have these conversations. This is not India. And there are many of us that are children of immigrants, like myself, that had a completely different life experience and are trying to wrap our heads around what happened to our people, which went through tremendous strain over not just the last 75 years, but the last few hundreds of years. And I think it's why it's very important to have not just an informed dialogue, but one that's not just talking to one side. Which unfortunately, as someone that works in American media, we just have an echo chamber situation where I see like the California governor doing an interview with a former White House press secretary, and I'm like, I don't need two liberals talking to one another. I would like someone to challenge one another. It's the same on the conservative side. Like they don't challenge one another. It's just basically PR, and we need to have real conversations. So anyway, Harjeet, I appreciate your questions, and Satish and Suhag, thank you for chiming in. Let me take a couple more here because I don't want to keep Suhag all day. She's been on here for 90 minutes. Let's have Kabila time. Kabila time, please go right ahead. You're on, Kabila. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is to Pandit ji and to all other people here. Since we are talking about Hindus and people are tarnishing our name and all that, what do you think? Jat community is not Hindu? Why I don't feel that kind of pain when Puneet Sani was openly saying again and again, please do not dodge my question. Do not dodge my question. Do not go left or right. As soon as it happened to Brahmins, oh, why we are doing this to Brahmins, poor Brahmins, victim Brahmins. I think it is time for other communities to wake up. You guys are not enough Hindu that Brahmins can support you when it's happening to you. In fact, they will help that person to do it to you. But as soon as it happens to Brahmin, they're gonna try to, oh, it's happening to Hindu, the whole Hindu. So my question is very clear to you. Jats are not enough Hindu. Why you guys didn't stop him from doing that?
Look, I'll take the accountability if you wanted, Satish and Suhag and everyone here is a guest to speak openly. I'm not going to curb your speech.
No, no,
I'm not going to curb Satish's
I,
speech
I,
or
I
anyone
don't
else.
want
I
you to
don't
take
believe.
responsibility. Why you guys don't have
Right.
that kind of feelings for other communities? You guys only, as a Hindu, only it is for the Brahmins. Where that feeling is coming from?
I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for anyone else. I don't think we have had a discourse about one specific subsect of Hindus or any other group.
Yeah.
And frankly, for those of us, again, I'm a different kind of moderator. You should understand that. I was born and raised in the United States as someone that was basically another brown kid that grew up around Samoans and Filipinos and Vietnamese kids and black kids. So it's very different for those of us who actually were truly a minority in this country and have actually dealt with real discrimination. And I don't know if that was caste based or just they looked at my face and didn't like me. But whatever the case was, they didn't, we all have felt this thing. So I'm sorry if you felt insulted by the previous speaker, but that was his
No,
comment. And you're
I
welcome
I'll
to
just,
chime in.
that's
Ravi,
why my question was to Pandit ji. My
yeah,
question was not to you. My question was to Pandit ji. As soon as it happened to Brahmins, Pandit ji started saying, "Oh, we should not do it." But it was happening clearly for Jats. It was like 5 minute monologue. Jats did this, Jats did that, Jats did that, and everybody was kind of praising it, encouraging it.
I'll just say, at least for HAF and the work that we're doing in California, the work that we do in Seattle, we're out there for all South Asians because that's who's been targeted. It doesn't matter what religion we are, it doesn't matter what language we are. To the average American, we all look the same and we're different. We make up 1.5% of this country. And it's more important than ever that we work together to address the types of discrimination that we face from non South Asians. And if and where it's occurring within our community, we need to do a better job of educating ourselves of both our rights and responsibilities. No community, no individual should be judged for anything other than their inherent worth. That is, to me, what Hindu Dharma teaches me. And it's what the US Constitution requires of us. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Kabila, why don't you finish your thought? And then Harjeet, you can chime in. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, again, same thing happened. My question was to Panditji. My question was not to you. Again.
Okay. I don't know if he's there or not.
Oh, he's not.
Go ahead.
I'm
Then I understand. My question
no,
was
no,
very, very
I'm
straightforward. Why the whole team was encouraging Puneet Sani to tarnish a one community, and when it happened to Brahmins, all of a sudden we woke up and said, "Oh, no, 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 don't do it."
Okay. Kabila, Satish is there. He can chime in. Go ahead, Satish.
Yeah, thanks very much, Davide. Firstly, although this is a bit of a digression from the core of this conversation, I will take a moment to respond. I generally don't respond when there is a lack of friendship in these conversations, but this is an important point. Let me make it crystal clear. Any community which is tarnished, especially if they are from our Sanatani family, is a community that warrants our support. Of that, there is no doubt at all. And Punithji was as incorrect in identifying one community as was Harjeetji in naming Samsung. I'm sure all of us, the moment he said the name of the company, all of us felt that moment where we thought, well, no, the whole company cannot be tarnished in this manner. We didn't want the company to be named, and yet it was named. But I would also share with you, Kabilaji, that here in the United Kingdom, when we had this caste issue thrust upon us, and we looked at the evidence that was presented in the House of Lords, they presented 32 cases And they continued to say Hindu community this, Hindu community that. Of those 32 cases, there were 29 cases which were from the Jat Sikh community. When Punithji was speaking, he mentioned that there were a number of cases, and I recall Suhagji also just referring to those specific cases. And they were also, I think, from the Jat Sikh community. Now, as a Punjabi who has grown up and has a huge family connection within that community, this is an issue that we have to work with. And that's the only reason why I didn't step forward to defend or to deny Punithji his comment, because I know there's a problem there that we're all going to have to work and try and resolve. And that's the fairly straightforward and simple response to you. Thank you for your question.
Great. Harjeet, I'll let you have the last word briefly. I've got to move on to other folks, and we do want to wrap up the session here and kind of focus on the Cisco topic again. Just to recap, Suhag Shukla from HAF is here with us to discuss this dismissal of charges against the two Indian American defendants implicated in the Cisco caste matter. Cisco is still on the hook for charges, but there will be a hearing in May shortly. Harjeet, I'll give you one more comment, and then I've got to move on to some other folks.
Got it. Yeah. No, I picked up the example of Tamil Brahmin, but that was not the intention. I picked up one example. I can pick up other communities as well. That doesn't matter. We all know that this caste-based discrimination happens across India. So my question to Suhag was, I think she advised that we should go to HR, like specifically in my example, that I should have gone to HR and get a recourse. My question is like, all these safeguards do exist, but obviously they are failing. Because if they were working, then we wouldn't have had the situation that I pointed out to you. So given that these are failing, and Puneet has also pointed out that these safeguards are not enough, we see discrimination all over. And I think Panditji also pointed out, we are seeing discrimination, caste-based discrimination across communities, specifically coming from subcontinent. Does it actually not convince you, Suhag, that we should have caste-specific non-discrimination laws, which actually make sure that this caste-based discrimination does not happen? Does it not make the case stronger to have these laws versus kind of deriding these laws and say, oh, we don't need these laws?
No, I'll quickly just mention that you cannot have laws that specifically single out and target a group on the basis of their membership in another protected class. And that's what you're asking for then, is that you're saying, okay, United States or City of Seattle or State of California, let's have a law that singles out and targets all people of Indian origin so that over time we're seen as both a nuisance and a liability. And I don't think we can make blanket terms about widespread discrimination without looking at individual fact situations and, at least some level of verifiable proof to at least begin the ball rolling. And non-discrimination laws are a pact. They are a pact between the government that institutes them, the employer that has to implement them, and the employee that needs to both abide by them and be protected by them. So we cannot absolve ourselves from the responsibility that we also play in there, that if you have faced wrongdoing, file a claim and follow the process and seek out help. But if these policies have not yet even been tested, if someone says, "Oh, I'm not protected and therefore I'm not going to file," I can't imagine a situation where someone would not seek justice if they've been wronged, at least to make that effort. And we, to date, do not have any indication of existing policies failing.
What I think, Swag, what he's saying is that as we have a system in place, penal code in India, banning casteism, we must import the same regime in the United States, ban casteism in all and every state in every form. He wants that enlightened stays. He wants that, a very unrealistic, it's incredible. He just wants us to recognize and the white people to recognize us Indians happens to be mired and marred with casteism. And we need to wash our, what is that dirty towel in public? What is that expression? I forgot about it. Yeah, he wants us to do this.
Let me tie this conversation. I'm going to actually remove all the speakers from the room. I appreciate everyone coming on. I have a few more speakers, and then I'm going to wrap this up because Suhag's been very generous with her time. But I will say this: as a journalist that has covered some honestly heinous, despicable crimes, stuff that I never even want to mention again. I've covered a death penalty trial. I've covered so much repulsive stuff in my career that now obviously we still have to cover it when it comes to our community. There has been all kinds of things committed, uh, incomprehensible acts by members of our own community. I have seen law enforcement, being the DOJ, the federal level, people at the state level, the FBI. There are concerned law enforcement that will prosecute whomever is doing something illegal. And so if you feel oppressed in any way, if you feel like these folks, whether it's a corporation or some other situation, we encourage you to prosecute them. I think there are lots of laws on the books that can be implemented. And if you are concerned about that, there are plenty of civil rights groups out there that can assist. I just feel as if someone who deals with litigation as a non-lawyer, I see a lot of really terrible cases affecting all communities. I mean, honestly. So I would encourage everyone here to understand that there is a framework already in place, and obviously this debate will continue because there is this California cast legislation that's been proposed, and we'll see what the next steps are. So thank you for all these folks that have come on stage. I'm going to remove all of you. I don't want to
Thank you.
offend anyone here, but I do
Thank
want to
you,
bring some other
Raviji.
voices on. And
Yeah,
then
thank you,
I'm going to bring some
Suhag.
other voices in here. Suhag, please stay, of course. But and then I'm going to bring us other folks. And if we can just limit our question to one single question, very brief. I know we all have stories to share, and I'm really appreciative we got to do this space today because it was timely. But if we can just keep it really brief, I would appreciate it. Let me go to Prakash, who's been very patient, waiting to ask a question. Prakash, please go ahead and chime in. Thank you so much. Prakash, go ahead. You unmute yourself, please. Okay, if Prakash, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, go right ahead. Chime in.
Yeah, so my question was do we know what specific action that made this case to be withdrawn?
Uh, yeah,
Suhag
sure.
mentioned this earlier, but go ahead and fill him back in.
Yeah. So if you look back at a December case, all right, there we go. If you look back at a case management filing from December, there was some indication that the defendants were going to file what's called a motion for sanctions, and they did, and that the state was showing some willingness to dismiss its case, voluntarily dismiss its case against the defendants if they didn't. Later in February, this motion for sanctions was filed. It had allegations of prosecutorial abuse, as well as suppressing and falsifying of evidence, as well as the constitutional issues also raised by the Hindu American Foundation in our Section 1983 federal lawsuit against the state on the way in which the state had trampled on their individual civil rights. And so we saw that there was a filing, I think last week, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, where that motion for sanctions was withdrawn. And then today we saw the filing in the court portal that temporarily dismissed with prejudice, which means that the state cannot file the case against the two defendants again.
Okay, great. Thank you for your question, Prakash. Let's go to Good Boy. Good Boy, please go ahead. Good Boy, please unmute yourself. You can please ask your question. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you so much for giving me the mic. I have a question to Suhag. You know, when we are like saying like we should have a law which would like basically remove all kinds of caste-related discrimination. And in return, you said we cannot single out one community or the people of the South Asian descent, so they will become vulnerable with such legislation. But if you look at the people from the other origins of the world, like the Europeans or Russians or other communities who are residing in North America and especially in the United States, they don't have such problems. We this caste related thing is mainly specific to the South Asian region and across all communities and all religions. So why not have these anti-caste related legislation so that people can feel more safe in workplaces and other areas, where people feel like they are being discriminated. When this problem is specific to the South Asian region, so we need to have these laws are a need of the hour. What do you say? Thank you.
Sure. It's not accurate to say that other communities don't have their intra-community tensions, dynamics, and prejudices. You can talk to people from China, and if you get to know them, you'll start learning about the different differences that they have within their communities. You talk to someone from Kenya, there might be intra-community differences. You talk to even under the large rubric of, say, African Americans or Latino Americans. And each one of these communities, it's human nature to, um, create these perceptions about others based on a variety of things, whether it's skin color, whether it's class, whether it's background, whatever it might be, culture, accent. Um, this these forms of prejudice exist in every single human society. And so, how do we address it? How do we tackle when we, of course, between races or between ethnicities, um, it maybe seems more obvious to people who are not within the law or understanding the law or see how it plays out. And then how do you deal with it for people within communities? And it's the same way. You create categories that protect against discrimination without singling out any one group. So that, I'll give you an example of, say, religious discrimination. If someone who's from a Protestant background, and then there's someone who's from a Catholic background, if one of them discriminates against the other, just because they both are under the larger umbrella of Christian, doesn't mean that that's wrong or that it's allowed. It's a violation of religious-based discrimination if the facts play out. So, in that similar way, whether it's something happening within two South Asians, whether it's something happening between two um, African Americans, whether it's between two people who have um, Arab descent, the fact is that the best way for us to have a diverse uh, society that's protected by the government has to treat all of us fairly. And the only way to do that is to have these facially neutral laws that don't single anyone out because of their background.
All right, thank you for that question. Let's go to Aman. Aman Singh, please go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Diya, for having me up on stage and beautiful conversation and amazing comments by Suhag. So, Suhag, I think first we need to understand that the nuances in other communities don't exactly pertain to the Indian community or the Hindu community, quote unquote. As Seattle, when they passed the law in 2023, they defined quote unquote caste as a system of rigid social stratification characterized by hereditary status. Now, here's the thing though, right? California does have laws on the basis of hereditary statuses. And, for example, people who are born as Dalits or, the members of the DBA community can't exactly change that. They're always going to be part of the Dalit community, right? And that is a hereditary status that they have been provided. That, by the way, the Indian government enforces. Right, it's in the Indian constitution. Right. Now the problem is when Cisco filed for this a similar case, they filed for plenty of plenty of indemnifications later, but the one that specifically stands out is the amicus curiae, right? Um, and they filed the demurrer. So essentially, when Cisco's position for filing the demurrer is that California law does not prohibit caste discrimination. That's what Cisco said. But on the contrary, when they were actually talking about it, we want to help the court understand that California law does not, in fact, we need to understand that it does, in fact, prohibit caste discrimination. So John Rushing, one of the lawyers that was representing the Ambedkar International Center, right? He talked about that, the California law talks about the ancestry discrimination. Similarly, if you look at the case in New Jersey, where Brahmins, the members of the upper caste, were forcing Dalits to, work under the minimum wage for $1 by calling them, hey, they're constructing a temple. They're here as religious workers. They're doing it, out of the goodness of their heart, which later turns out was also incorrect, and more than 100 people were, arrested on the basis of the whole thing, right? It was not only immigration fraud, it was also at the same time, discrimination against human beings, which is human trafficking. So the question is, when by design the whole caste system is designed to discriminate amongst the people of Indian origin from different communities by their ancestral rights, which is also, illegal and unconstitutional in the United States, and Seattle passing that law, I mean, I don't think it impacts the Hindu community at all, because if you think about it, Hindus, yes, of course, they invented this whole thing, but at the same time, it's no longer.
Aman, can you just ask your question? Because I asked you to be brief, and please
Oh yeah,
respect.
yeah,
I have like
I'm
dozens of
wrapping it
people.
up.
So just ask your question,
Yeah. So the
please.
question here is, why would you call something like caste discrimination, which is, by the way, termed by almost all human rights organizations, worse than apartheid in Southern Africa, North Africa, something that's far worse than apartheid, far worse than slavery? Why would you think that banning that might not be good idea, might not be constitutional, might actually be targeting a certain type of people or a certain community like Indian, because it's completely different. We have 1.8 billion people. I mean, if you think about it. So just wanted to say that.
Thanks for that non-question. Aman, you listen, I understand you may have a narrative, but ask a question. We've had a civil discourse. Suhag, if you want to chime in, you can, or if you want to skip it. But by the way, some of your facts are incorrect. The temple situation in New Jersey is another case that I'm following. I follow pretty much everything in the diaspora. Again, it has not been settled. There's no
More
verdict
than 100 people were
that
arrested.
happened.
That's in the news. Forbes talked
Listen, I
about
mean,
it.
I can arrest you on any kind. I can say anything, and you can be arrested for anything, and you are innocent
So you
until
were
presented
telling me cops were not
accused
doing
of
their
guilty
due
for it.
diligence and just
No, no. What I'm
willy-nilly
saying
arrested
is,
100 people without looking at their
part of the
identifications?
reason we're doing this conversation. Listen, man. Part of the reason we're having this conversation is that these two guys have now, their reputation's been tarnished forever. Whether you think they were discriminated, I mean, we don't have all the facts. None of us have read every single bit of this thing and know what's in their hearts. But I'll tell you what, there are a lot of people that are accused of crimes and they're found not guilty. Look at all the African American men that have been accused historically of committing crimes in this country, and then they're jailed for decades. And then eventually it finds out, oh yeah, we had a key piece of evidence that was withheld. Listen, it's not an easy thing to go through law enforcement, but what I'm saying is let everyone have their day in court. And so the folks in New Jersey, if they have committed crimes, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I believe in that. I think almost everybody, hopefully, in this room does. And Suhag, if you want to chime in on Ahmad, I just think I'm not interested in hearing someone go off on a 3-minute narrative, especially when we're wrapping up this room. But Suhag, go ahead if you want to respond to him. Okay, so we'll move forward. Let's go to Rade. Rade, you are up next. Go ahead. And please be brief. We're talking like 30-second questions for everybody. I got too many people in the room and too many people accusing us of not putting on their narratives, and obviously that's not the way we do things. I let people talk, whatever side you're on. We want to have an open discourse, but just have an argument in good faith and be direct. Just ask your question. Radhe, please unmute yourself and go ahead. Okay, I don't hear. I'm going to invite a few more people up to the room. Let's see here. Let's go to Abba. Abba, go ahead, please. You can unmute yourself. Abba? Oh,
Oh yeah,
maybe I
actually
have
you
this thing on mute.
host you muted everyone.
Yeah. Go ahead, Abba.
Okay, thank you, Raviji. My question to Suhag is, yeah, there was like so many Khalistani came here with their narratives, and some of them are well, all those people like who actually at one point threatened Puneet. So I'm not gonna go into that case now here. My question to Suhag is that, I mean, this is now real that this case was actually, if we see, it's a fabricated because we know how the things are going with Equality Lab and so many Khalistanis part of it. If tomorrow, because being in a corporate, I think till now, in my 20 years of experience, nobody came and asked me my caste. Till now, till the date now. Though I never put my caste in after my name. So my question is, if anything similar happens, because it is going to be happening, because it is, the things are not going to stop here. The whatever my experience is, especially with these kind of things, I've been following this Cisco case from very long. They just it is not going to be a stepping stone for some people to imagine, like, if some worker is not working properly and he is being terminated. I'm just giving you just very vague language. I don't know how to put it in the language. And then tomorrow he go or she go put a case because I'm from that so and so class, this person is so and so caste, that's why he just terminated me. I don't know, like, it is gonna still work it, or again, they can just go and harass the people on the base of this caste discrimination. That's my question. Thank you.
Um,
Go ahead,
So,
Suhag.
sorry, Ravi, I couldn't unmute myself, so now I can speak again. Just in terms of the previous speaker, look, there were a lot of blanket statements and inaccurate statements that were made there, and I agree with you that there has not been an indictment. This is the problem with the media running with stories without all the facts. This is the problem with government agencies going to the press before going to the courts or doing their due diligence. And I think we saw that in Cisco, unprecedented to see a press release released on the day that a case is filed. And so, we've got to allow the process to unfold. Otherwise, there's no chance for fairness. And if someone has been wronged, um, they should get a remedy. And if someone has been falsely charged with something, then they should be relinquished from that sort of accusation. And that's what we've seen happen today. In terms of the downstream effects of having a category like caste on the books, yes, it puts suspicion on people of Indian origin. And it doesn't matter what background you come from. And that's why we need to keep sticking to what has certainly not been a perfect process. The United States is still on its journey of ensuring that everyone has equal protection and equal opportunity. But what has worked and where we have seen tremendous improvements is under, facially neutral, generally applicable categories that protect everyone without singling anyone out. And I just can't emphasize that enough. Discrimination is not a solution to discrimination.
Great. All right. Radhe, please chime in. We've got to be very brief with these questions because we got to wrap this up in a moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Uh, I have just few quick questions. Um, Everyone, we know that caste is a problem. Uh, I'm living in North America and I'm facing this discrimination. But if any society and any government is trying to wipe off this evil from any society, then why we have any problem? And another question is, only upper caste Hindus, those have a problem when any state they are making any law against caste discriminations because they are oppressors. I think so. Most of them they are leading those are anti those are against this caste discrimination bills. Why always they are Brahmins or upper caste Hindus? The lower caste Hindus they have a problem with caste and they are struggling this evil. But I don't think so. You guys are saying, oh, no, this is not a problem. Every society have some problems. But we can't close our eyes. If any society have a problem, then we should speak about it. Why are we gonna just close our eyes and we're gonna say, oh no, these problems are in every society, these problems are in this country, that country? This is bullshit. I think so. We know that caste discrimination is widely spreading in North America, and we should say yes to SB 403. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Radhe. But you had no question, but just a comment. I just want questions. If listen, I understand it's a contentious situation, but Suhag, do you want to chime in real quick on what he had to say?
I think we need to make our decisions on evidence and facts, not generalizations, and that's all. And constitutional principles. For anyone who lives in the United States, you need to understand what the laws are in this country and abide by them. And if they are being violated, you need to speak out. And that's what SB 403, that's what Seattle laws, that's what so many of these campus policies have done. They are singling out and targeting all South Asians. If you don't think that that's going to harm you and future generations, you don't know anything about American history, and you don't know anything about American law.
Suhag, I'm going to give Gia the last question. Apologies to all. We got so many tweets. I guess I think we've been balanced because we've been taking heat from both sides. We got people, or many sides actually, not just one. I'm getting accused of being anti this and anti that, and well, I guess I've done my job here. Gia, you last question for Suhag, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. Gia, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Suhag, whatever you are doing. I really appreciate you are working for the cause. Richa is there, and many more whom I know personally. And I would say, what do you understand about caste, first of all? Who has created the caste system? Caste system was never a part of Sanatan Dharma, which has been blamed anonymously by people for Sanatan that we have created caste system. Caste even doesn't come from our system. It comes from Western society. It comes from Western phenomena, Western ideology. So first of all of us has to have clear text and processes and knowledge about the caste system. That what is caste system is. We always believe in Varna, which is having quality in a person, having a similar kind of quality of performing an art, performing a duty, performing their own, capabilities in the human society. That was the Varna system was. Caste has nothing to do with Varna. And we are just got blamed to do this caste system. So first of all, before even discussing about the same issue, all of us who have gone through the text, who has gone through the, Bhagavad Gita, who has gone through the Ramayana, they are all aware about that. Even the person like the Hanumana or the squirrel
who just performed the duty towards dharma has been got the complete mileage of that. So I would just suggest, before discussing this, we shall all of us, whosoever is in this space and is speakers, to know about the caste system. Brahman was not the one by caste. Brahman was the one who was known and who was knowing the Brahma, the Brahmanda. Brahmanda is universe, right? The how universe performs. That was the knowledge which one attained. That was Brahman. So I would suggest.
G, with respect, can you ask your question? Because we really do need to
Yeah,
wrap this
yeah,
up.
yeah. So the question is the caste system, which is discussed by all of us in the US. We shall at least go by text, which are telling the caste system. You will not at all find the caste system. I would suggest Suhag, and I would ask Suhag to at least share this knowledge to all of us who are there and discussing about the same issue, which is not at all an issue, which is actually a fake issue created by few people who are just trying to break the agenda and creating a new agenda out of us. We have never kept this kind of agenda in the society. We are not the creator of this agenda. That's it. So my request with Suhag, to give a light on this subject properly, to make people who are connected to you properly. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Gia. Suhag, I don't know if you want to chime in on what you had to say, and then I want to ask you one
I
last
mean,
question.
I will say in terms of, a point on linguistic hygiene is that, look, everyone talks about caste as if everyone's talking about the same thing. But the fact is that there is no legal nor academically agreed upon definition of caste. You can take all of the different policies across all the campuses, across city of Seattle or California. Every single one of them define it differently, and therein also poses a challenge in terms of uh, what's called void for vagueness. Is that you have to have clarity of what exactly you're legislating. And, this is a topic for an entirely different conversation because otherwise we'll go on for another hour and a half. But, the term caste is certainly an administrative or legal category in India, but it has flattened or reduced significant diversity in the Indian subcontinent, a variety of different social markers, social identities, et cetera, et cetera. So, you can have 10 people in a room talking about caste and they're all talking about very different things, or they're going to refer to a very reductive and inaccurate pyramid in which it shows, four quote unquote castes that are in a rigid hierarchy. Indian society or South Asian society has never been four classes. It's been thousands of different communities, and those have evolved over time and changed. Their status is all depending on whatever local dynamics are. So, in terms of the point about um, a consistent definition, I think that there are, legal concerns around that as well. So I'll just leave it at that.
Man, I want to apologize to all the folks that are trying to get on stage. We've been at this for more than 90 minutes now, and Suhag and I have some other things to attend to today. In fact, just to let everybody know, and I want to ask one last question of you, Suhag. But if you're interested in this topic, if you're interested in caste and all the different aspects, all the different arguments, because there are many arguments that were not posed in this conversation, and I'm mindful of that as an actual journalist. There are people that have different thoughts on the matter. Go to our YouTube channel, which I think is a pretty comprehensive resource for all these cast discussions. Diya TV USA on YouTube. Subscribe. Please follow us on all these different social platforms. And of course, for those of you that are unaware, we're a national television network in the United States, broadcasting 24/7 to about 25 markets around the country, including most of the major cities throughout the U.S. So, Suhag, I want to ask you one question. I really appreciate your patience, and obviously, people have different opinions, and I'm very open to that. I want people to. We should be able to have an open discussion and challenge one another for our notions. There are people that have been tweeting, so I guess we've struck a chord because we've had hundreds of people in here throughout the whole conversation. But we're starting to get memes now, which I think is impressive. Suhag, people are saying HAF is funding Hindu nationalists. Can you, before we go here, not to ask you a question out of left field, but I want to make sure that you set the stage for what you guys are, because I've known Suhag for many years. I've always found her to be very thoughtful and direct, and there is no, a lot of honestly, there's a lot of folks that I talk to that are not like that, that are not straightforward. And obviously, I talk to political leaders and corporate leaders and all kinds of folks. But if I have a question about something, Suhag's been very open to answer my questions about what's going on and what she's seeing. So when people make these allegations about you, about HAF, I see the term Brahmin thrown around. What do you have to say to that? I just want, before we go, because I know some people are firing things up online. I just want you to have the
Sure.
last word and kind of wrap this up with a bow.
Absolutely. Well, HAF, we were founded by second generation Hindu Americans, born and raised in America. I'm not quite sure that we have any um, dream of making America a Hindu nation, if that's what they mean by Hindu nationalist. We are nonpartisan, and we're a nonprofit. Our finances are available on GuideStar or whatever it's called these days. Um, we we fund our work, which is educating the public about Hinduism and advocating for the rights and well-being of not just Hindus but all people on the planet, because that's what the tradition tells us. When someone has to resort to name calling or making false accusations of dual loyalty or holding Hindu Americans to a double standard rather than arguing on the merits of the claim, I think it's more a reflection on that person than it is on an organization that's supported by thousands of hardworking Hindu Americans across the country. And we have partnerships with so many other faith based and secular organizations who are committed to upholding the principles that this country has promised in our founding documents that we've fallen short of, and depend on people on the front lines of civil rights to ensure that they are upheld. And that's all I have to say about that.
All right, Suhag, you have certainly set off quite a tweet storm. There's all kinds of folks that have questions and comments, and this debate will continue. And as Suhag mentioned, the California court dismissed the case against the two Indian American defendants. Cisco is still on the hook for the moment, at least. There will be a hearing in May to see where Cisco goes. Could they settle? Could this be dismissed against that corporation? We're not sure yet. But the two Indian Americans in question, their case has been dismissed, and obviously it was a trying time for them, having your name out there for 3 years. And so this is a continued conversation. I'm sure, Suhag, we will talk on our next conversation, if you were so inclined, to talk about the California caste legislation that has been proposed by State Senator Aisha Wahab, which is also here in the Bay Area. That we did not hear today. I'm sorry. There's all these prominent people, frankly, literally guys running for Congress. I see you, Ritesh. I'm sorry for not. Really appreciate Suhag Shukla from HAF taking so much time out of her schedule, and for all of you for tuning in. Again, check us out throughout our social channels if you want to see other discussions. We've had extensive discussions on these topics and all the things affecting the diaspora. And if we're missing something, tweet us, let us know, send us an email. We want to be engaged with all of you and really cover the issues that are pertaining to all of us. If you live in the United States as we do, if you aren't speaking out for your issues, they will not get addressed. Take my word. If someone who deals with the folks at TV Sunday nights at 8, but it's also in a podcast form, so you can check us out through every podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, and it's also on YouTube. So check it out. We have all these great discussions with thought leaders like Suhag and so many others. So Suhag, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next time.